favorite song. John Stettin, Past the Wire. Good morning, everybody. Coming to you from the Past the Wire War Room studio office. Everything all wrapped up in one, as usual. We're going to talk Sport of Kings and interesting handicapping dilemma that bettors of all walks face. The experienced bettor, the novice, or even recreational player, all have to deal with this. Probably more often than we'd like to, but it is a part of the game, and it is something that we have to deal with and adapt to on a regular basis. It's not going away anytime soon. And interestingly enough, the Kentucky Derby point system, which changed a couple of years ago from money won to points, kind of brings this even more into play. And I decided to talk about it today because one of the tracking trip members, a gentleman by name Kevin West, also a guy I consider a friend, good handicap, a nice guy, brought up the point to me and thought it would be an interesting idea for either a column or a broadcast. So I decided to talk about it in a broadcast and just share how I handle it. And it's dealing with prep races. And in a prep race, when a trainer or connections of a horse are using one race to get ready to peak for another race, creates the dilemma of whether or not the horse is in there at 100% and all out trying to win, or whether obviously he's using that race to improve and get better and peak for the race that's the intended goal. And we'll talk a little bit about how trainers do this with the Derby and how they used to do it before the point system in a minute or two. But this is something that's been around a long time, and it's not going anywhere. And there's another aspect of it that I want to tie in, because I think it's basically the same principle. There's an old saying, you don't hear it as much anymore, but back in the day you heard it a lot, and it was give a horse a race, or to give him a race, they're giving him a race. And this is something we face when, and it's the same scenario in essence, when a trainer doesn't really crank their horses to win first time out or off a layoff. They use a race or two to kind of run or race them into shape. And sometimes they'll give a horse a race. And I'll share a story. I forget the title that I called the article, something about bagels, but it's a story about that very, very situation. When I first became a jockey agent, I had the book of a kid, and I'll post the link to that story along with this article, but on the website. But I had a jockey, a 10-pound apprentice for a while named Ralph Foresta. And Ralph told me a story that had happened to him prior to my taking his book. And it was one of the reasons why he felt he was having a hard time getting mounts, and it was a race he won. So you would think a race that a jockey won would help him get mounts. That wasn't the case. He rode a horse, I believe the horse's name was Fane, for a trainer named Lenny Imperial. And he was working horses for Lenny Imperial in the morning, and he rode this horse, and he said the horse was an import from South America, hadn't run in the U.S. yet. And he told me that they told him in the paddock, the trainer told him, listen, today's not really his day. We want to give him a nice race, get him accustomed to racing here in the United States, kind of give him one, get him acclimated, and then next time we think he'll improve a lot, and we're going to bet on him and, hopefully cash a ticket. But let's just give him a little bit of an education today, get him a little bit in shape. And Mike Venezia, who at the time Ralph didn't know, but subsequently found out was going to ride the horse next time out when they liked him, may he rest in peace, saw Ralph in the paddock and said, hey, keep that horse out of trouble today, give him a nice easy run. Ralph didn't realize what he was being told without being told. But I think a lot of you can kind of get it. I surely did even back then, 30-something years ago when he told me this story. Anyway, the race goes off. The horse breaks out of the gate like a rocket, goes right to the lead. Now, Ralph panicked. You know, he was a 10-pound bug. He hadn't ridden many races. I believe this is the first one he wound up winning, but he went right to the lead, and he immediately went into survival mode. He told me, listen, this horse was running off, running out of his skin, pulling me out of the saddle. He goes, and really, all I could think about was holding on, because I certainly didn't want to fall off while I was in front, and there were 10 horses behind me. So poor Ralph held on the whole way, and the horse never stopped. He was the only guy in the winner's picture. Him and the groom. Nobody was there. So the next morning, he shows up at the barn, happy that he won, and he brought donuts and bagels and coffee to the barn. Anyway, long story short, Ralph went flying out of the barn, and the coffee, donuts, and bagels went flying out. I think Flying Donuts is the name of the article if you want to look it up on PastTheWire.com. Anyway, that horse, they intended to give him a race. Now, he won. And let's keep in mind, horses can humble anybody. Anybody. They often win when they're entered to fill a race. And that means sometimes, you know, a race needs so many entries for it to go, for them to use the race on the actual card. And if you've got a horse you want to run in that race, a lot of times you'll enter another horse not thinking they're going to win, just to make the race go. Well, sometimes horses that are entered to make a race go jump up and win when nobody expects it. You've got morning glories that work out fast in the morning, bring top dollar at the sales. Everybody thinks they're a runner. They can't run when it gets to, you know, post time, and they've got to be competitive in a race situation. You just don't know. You have horses that don't train well, don't work fast, and then come out in a competitive race situation and they win. So, you know, does giving a horse a race or using a race as a prep race mean a horse cannot win? No. But it certainly is not the scenario you want to be in as a bettor, betting on a horse that may not be all out, all in, or may have a rider more experienced than little Ralphie was, and, you know, making sure that the horse is just given a race and given a little bit of an education. So as bettors and handicappers, how do we handle that? Now, everybody's got their own way, and I'm the first to say, if you've got a way of dealing with this, even if it's ignoring it and just, you know, playing ostrich, putting your head in the sand and just acting like it's not something that we need to deal with, and that works for you, then I always say whatever works for you is what you should do. I handle it in a specific way. What I try and do is I try and familiarize myself with all the trainers, all their patterns, their work patterns, and read into their tells, and they have them, especially the good ones. And when I say good, I don't mean only the top echelon stakes guys, even the sharp claiming trainers. They have tells, little things that they do, don't do, how they space their works, the distance of their works, whether they're breezing, handling. They telegraph a lot of times what their intent is and what they are going to do. And I try and learn all those nuances. And I look at the stats as well. But I really like to learn the nuances better than the stats, because stats, I always say, on any given Sunday, any given Saturday, anything can happen. And if a guy wins with 1 out of 100 first-time starters, and you bet that one that day, you're still a winner. The 99 that he lost don't matter to you. So to me, you know, my approach is, yeah, I like to know the stats, and they do factor in. But again, on any given day, we know anything can happen. Every race is different. Every scenario is different. Every lineup is different. So with that in mind, I like to know the little nuances and things that I observed and apply my memory to what I've seen guys do in the past and what I've seen happen in the past, because in racing, like a lot of other things, history repeats itself. So once you zone in on that and say, okay, this guy likes to give his horses a race, but they do come out running well. Maybe I could use him here against this particular field. Or this guy likes to give a horse a race, and they're really never cranked up and they can't win, especially in a field like this where you got some, you know, guys that do crank their horses up. So I try and look at all of those different things. In prep races, what I try and do is try and estimate, okay, you know, we know what this horse's A race is. We know what his A race can move forward to. But we know the trainer is using this as a prep, and his goal is this other stake race. So he's probably going to be, at his, 90% or B or A minus race. And different trainers, that gap can spread a lot more than with other trainers. That's something that experience and observation and memory will help you with. But, okay, it doesn't mean that I won't bet the horse, but I have to think the horse can win with his, B or 90% race. Or maybe C or the 80% race, depending on who the trainer is, what the goal is, and how far away from the goal they are. Also, historically, when I look at that particular horse, I look at how that trainer performs when he uses prep races in the past. Because, like I said, history will repeat itself. So there is somewhat of a science in evaluating, when somebody's giving a horse a race, when somebody's, using the race as a prep. Now, when a guy's out there, and this happens unfortunately in the game, but when a guy's out there giving a horse a race to the point where what the intention with Fane was just not to win, and it's an experienced rider, that's an unfortunate part of the game that happens. And if you bet that horse, you're going to tear up your ticket. The positive that we can get out of that is possibly those trainers, and then we'll use the term, that like to put horses over or cash a bet, they telegraph that too. And a lot of times the odds, the betting patterns, the will pays can telegraph whether a horse is meant, whether he's not meant. Some guys that play that game take a lot of money when they win. Some guys who play that game, and these guys usually have a much lower percentage of winning, like to do it and get 20, 30 to 1. And they'll do it 2 or 3 times a year, or once or twice a year. And if you zone in on those, you can ride those waves right to the beach with them. So there are all little nuances and little observations you can use to deal with these scenarios that unfortunately we face. The thing is, there's no shortcut to it. It's not something I could do a little broadcast on and say, listen, this is how you handle it, this is what you do, and your percentage is going to improve. It's something that I think improves with experience. The more experience you have, the more you watch, the more astute you are, and the better your memory is, and the more focused you become over time. No shortcut. You'll develop a way of handling the situation with giving a horse a race and using a prep race. Now, to close, we'll say the Kentucky Derby and the point system has changed that. It used to be that you could really point for the Derby, use races as prep races, and really get your horse to move up a lot in the Derby. And, because 2-year-old races essentially don't count anymore, even if, there are a couple of points and a lot of money, that's not going to get you in because it's not based on money won. When it was, the preps were much more difficult to deal with. Now, you've got to get your horse to peak or near peak twice, because you've got to do it at least in one of the preps in order to get into the Derby, and then again, hopefully in the Derby itself. So that's changed a little bit and probably made it easier for the bettor to evaluate and bet on those key Kentucky Derby prep races, because most of the horses that are really looking to get in and really serious are all out and all in. And sometimes, horses are in a position where they have to be all out and all in because they've got to run 1-2 in order to qualify for the Derby, and that's their goal. So in those situations, it makes it a little easier. In the other situations, we deal with it, how we deal with it. And like I said, I have my own way of looking at it and evaluating it. I definitely make sure I remain cognizant of it. And that's the best thing you can do to start, is remain cognizant of it. Know it's something that happens. Learn the trainers that do it and don't do it, and how they do it. And if you can hone in on their tells and little nuances, you're a step ahead of everybody else. John Stettin, Past the Wire. This is the place you come to get my opinion, to get whatever you want on the Sport of Kings. This was something that one of the tracking trip members brought up. You don't have to be a tracking trip member. Any questions, anything you want me to address, anything you want to see a broadcast on, shoot me a message and an email, and I'll try and do it if it makes sense. And we got a lot coming up for the Belmont, so stay tuned, subscribe, check back, and stay in touch. and hope everybody enjoys the day and makes some money with the horses today. Ciao for now.